right, starting to get some attendees. Hello, everyone. As we wait for some folks to filter in, Eric, have you watched any films lately that you've really liked?
Oh, yes. That's a good question. What are movies I've seen? I have actually gone to the movies lately, been making more of an effort. I saw Twister. I really liked
Oh,
that.
yeah.
That was fun. Lots of visual effects in that. And then what anime? Oh, I just saw Wild Robot, which absolutely
I need
mine.
to watch that.
It is so beautiful. Yeah, I highly recommend it if nobody's seen it yet. It is, I'm gonna go see it again for sure. Yeah, and on the big screen. It's so colorful, so beautiful. The story is really touching. So
It looks so touching, even just from the trailers. I feel like I've welled up.
yes,
I
yeah,
know
yeah,
it's going to be a tearjerker.
yeah. You cannot, yeah. My wife cried. She said she cried twice, and my daughter cried. Yeah, my son got really choked up. But yeah, I can't wait to see it again.
Kind of a great movie.
Yeah, my favorite one this summer, and I've watched a couple other ones, but those are the two that's popping in my head right now.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right, well, it looks like we've got more folks who have joined, so I'll go ahead and get us started. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining BRIC's Animation, Visual Effects, and Gaming Pre-Apprenticeship Speaker Series. For those of you who are returning, welcome back. For those of you who are new, hello. My name is Sarah. I'm BRIC's Director of Communications and your moderator for today. And this speaker series is from the BRIC Foundation, and it aims to provide early awareness and education about the variety of careers that exist across animation, visual effects, and gaming industries. And today we're super excited to dive into the world of virtual production with our special guest here, Eric Roth. Eric will share more about his personal career journey and more information about what a career in virtual production entails and the technologies that go along with it. And at the end, we'll have an audience Q&A for the last 15 minutes of the session. So please make sure to use that Q&A box to submit any questions you might have for Eric along the way. So with that, Eric, please feel free to uh, give everyone an overview of your career.
Sure. Hey everyone, thanks Sarah. And hey everyone, as Sarah mentioned, my name is Eric Roth. What I'm going to do at first is just kind of tell a little story about my journey, and then I'll show you some images to go along with that. For starters, let's see, I've worked in both visual effects and animation for a little over 20 years. During that time, going back to my days in high school, at that time, I knew that I wanted to do something creative as an artist. I just wasn't sure what it was at that time. So I did end up going to art. Well, it was a university. I went to Syracuse University. There, I was in the art program, kind of just trying to figure out. At that time, I wasn't fully decided as to what I wanted to do and be. And so at that time, I got into advertising, graphic design, was doing commercials, and then just I started really, really enjoying that idea of creating moving images, which kind of jumping ahead got me into film and visual effects. During that time, I took on a really interesting journey. And that's why I want to take you through it because my path, along with many people, once they had sort of thought they knew what they wanted to do, then I got into the industry and I just kept learning and trying to figure out all kinds of different avenues of just trying to absorb everything that was going on around me so I could just sort of get more interested in the big picture of how to make movies, whether it was live action or animation. And so I'll talk through that and then we can kind of review some questions and then I'll get to where I am these days and working with technology and virtual production. So let me share sorry, one second. Oops. Sorry, I jumped ahead there. Okay, here we go. All right, so just to start off, share my slideshow. Okay, so a little bit about myself is that once I got jumped into visual effects, I just wanted to highlight that these are some of the companies that I had the opportunity to work for. I put them kind of in order. I kind of put these out there because not only were these great opportunities at the time of where I started, these are some of the companies that really were my education outside of college. You know, each one of them taught me new ways of thinking and taught me all these different tools, mindsets. Throughout that flow and process of working at these different companies, that they're all California-based companies. These two, Centropolis and Digital Domain, were in Southern California. Industrial Light and Magic, some of you may know that. That's George Lucas's company. That's in Northern California. And then I transitioned from right around here into animation. And that's when I started working at DreamWorks, which I'm going to go into and how it informed me to work today, as well as the Disney Animation Company and Imageworks. So throughout this process, I was doing different things, working on different tools and learning different processes from how to create visual effects, and then all those tools kind of related into animation. Um, so let me show you the next slide. So I put these out here for visual effects because these were some of the bigger films that really kind of set not only my career but got me more and more excited as I jumped onto each project. I feel very fortunate, of course, that I got to work on large films like this, be surrounded by amazing talent, not only the actors but also what I was enamored by was the skill level of the artists and the people who developed the tools that we got to work with. So each one of these projects, you know, these were my early days of learning, was going on to the Grinch. Then when I worked at Industrial Light and Magic, I worked on both Men in Black 2 and Star Wars Episode 2. So my series of two there. And so those were the days that I really learned the idea of like how to work and collaborate with people on these large teams and work together, um, as an organization to kind of finish a film. You would not believe how challenging that can be when you have anywhere from 200 to 400 people for everyone to be on the same page and have the same idea of how this movie should work forward. Because you have a bunch of artists who are all very creative, and have their own ideas, but at the end of the day, you're here to make that same vision for that artist, whether it's George Lucas or Ron Howard or whoever that is. And then this last one here I put in sort of the story of the iteration of my career, which was when we worked on the Matrix series. I worked on both Reloaded and Revolutions that worked as one series. That was where my career really started to take off. These projects were so huge and overwhelming for the studio themselves that if we were interested in taking on more, they gave it to us so we could challenge ourselves and learn new tool sets and learn new aspects of a department. I came in doing one thing and I came out knowing so much more and having so many more opportunities. So I bring that up and bring it out there that for me in my life, what has made me very successful is not just wanting to do the task that I was handed, but more being eager to learn more and take on more. As long as I was willing to, you know, not overextend myself too much. But that being said, the Matrix series was definitely a very challenging, you know, probably some of the hardest times that I've worked in my life. After I left working that is actually where I took my transition and had an amazing opportunity to jump into animation. I worked at DreamWorks for a little over 13 years. The representation of these movies here, I actually found this slide from somebody online, this image, which is a collection of I think every movie they've ever done, and I counted, and I've actually touched 17 of these these projects, of these movies that I've been on. So once again, incredibly fortunate to spend a good chunk of my career working through and working on with different creatives on different stories, and literally going from Flushed Away to Shrek to B Movie, just like trying to challenge myself with like, how does this movie work, and how, how do we all get this story done together? Same thing where it's, about 300 people working on a project together, but it was such a great period of my life of really learning tools. Now, I want to note something, and then I'm going to show you about, what I did at the studio, and how it worked. Um, this was another like learning transition period of my life, where I went from just being a kid who went to art school and trying to make pretty pictures along with everyone else, and then also trying to figure out the tools themselves. I got very curious about, why do the tools work the way that they do? Are there ways that I can improve them based on how I work? And anything that I saw was maybe more of a repetitive task. Are there things that we can do to then enhance them and automate them? So I started not only asking those questions, but learning myself. And when I say that, I didn't become some sort of great coder or anything, but I really wanted to understand under the hood. So I would talk to those developers and try and see how we can improve. So it was like a group discussion on helping enhance things. So I'm noting that as, where my career is going to take me next. So let's talk about what I did at DreamWorks. I worked in a department that was called the lighting department. We called it lighting compositing, but I'll go into the lighting aspect. So what that means is you're taking a 3D tool. Some of them you may or may not be familiar with. One of the bigger ones is called Maya. A lot of the studios use Maya. There's Blender. Houdini is another one. So these are the main tools that we use. And what that would do is simulate light the way that we see it in the real world. So that would mean you could create a sunlight, and it would give you the same physics of how the sunlight would work, the direction of it and the fall off of it. And just the same if you wanted to create a lamp or a firelight, any of those things, we would have to learn how to balance those and create them. And so just being an artist and creating an image is very powerful, but also understanding the way the world works and how you observe it, the physics of the lighting. If you start studying that and observing it, it's what I like to do is look at movies I like, go outside on walks and observe, the difference between light in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, and how it's actually affecting not only just the sky, but everything around you. So once you start observing that, taking pictures, looking at things online, you start to see all these things that, we're showing here as how the difference between hard light and soft light and how that affects an image, right? And so what I have up here too is a diagram that we talk about a lot, which is like this 3-point lighting. I won't go into too much detail about it. If anyone's interested later, I can describe it a little bit more, but this is a very traditional way of character lighting. You have a key light, a little bit of fill, and then a backlight. And we light characters that way all the time in animation because it's the way that we're used to seeing it in studio lighting. So this is what I did for a good chunk of my career. And then we were building not only off of Maya, then we started building in-house tools to enhance it. And I would get very much involved in how those would work. So as I had mentioned from all those films I worked on, that's mainly what I was doing. So this is just carrying on other aspects that you like to know and observe if you ever wanted to get into CG lighting. It's not just about lighting quality, it's also about the materials themselves and how they respond. So we have to balance those things of like, if it's a wood floor, how would the light hit that wood floor, and how would it then react to that environment? And then you also think about, what is that material? Is it reflective? Is it matte? Does it have glass? And if it is glass, will the light then penetrate through that glass and then shoot out a different way? All those things we think about. And it was interesting when I was younger, when I first had to start juggling those things. And I said, oh man, I just want to make pretty pictures. I don't really care about all the, the engineering. Why does the application not work the way I like? Why don't the materials work the way I like? But eventually it just started sinking in over time. It was very hard at first. I will fully admit, when I first started learning all this stuff, I felt like a circus juggler trying to like balance all these things out of like understanding how a light works, understanding how material works, making sure that the director's happy with the composition. But it seems and sounds scary at first, but in reality, the more you do it, the more you realize, okay, my brain can start to multitask these things one thing at a time. And when you're younger, they never throw you in the deep end at first. They always, gradually give you some easier tasks to get you used to it and conditioned to how how working with a big group like that is. So there's always an ease into it, and they have entry level and expert level positions in that way. So just pointing these out as things that we think about in the lighting world. And once again, I talked about these lighting studies. So I always like to reference these and bring up not only what my favorite films are, but I also think about, okay, why is this dramatic? Why is this nice? And why does this appeal to me? What makes the difference between dramatic lighting and comedy lighting? And then some lights are harsher, some lights are softer. Why is that? How does it enhance the story? So we always talk about lighting and telling a story and how that works and how that influences us in cinematography. And then just the same, I also like to discuss with my colleagues what lighting I do like versus what lighting I don't like, right? There's always a good critique in finding things that don't appeal to you. And so you know that that's something that you may not want to use. But I'm always taking notes of things that, ooh, I've never seen that before. How would I make that? How would I make that in a computer generated image? So I'm constantly pulling from not only famous cinematography, but things that I'll find online as well. And then so cut to things. These are all I took from projects that I worked on. So these are movies I worked on, and we tell those stories with lighting, and they're very specific. The way we shape the characters are different than the way we shape the characters on here, and vice versa. You could actually go through and see this key light on this character, and you could see how it's brighter and has a different color versus the Shrek is like more warm and saturated, and there's always a justification for a light and a color and a motivation behind it. And not only is there a motivation behind it, but we carry that through the entire project, and we have people that kind of, whether it's the director or the cinematographer, will help guide us and inform us on that palette of the decisions they make for those colors, and those colors and those shadow qualities will dictate and help enhance how that's motivated. So I'm going to bring up right now a couple of pieces of technology. So I brought up, the 3D package where we do the color and lighting. And so what's going to happen is when I bring all these different things together, you're going to see how it's going to bring us to the end result of virtual production. Okay. So this is called motion capture. And so what happens is you have cameras that are up here on a frame or in a stage, and then they track those markers that are on a suit. You can see kind of a reference here, and then it captures them in 3D space, okay? And that's how it's represented and calculated. This was actually part of my journey as well, because a few years into my process, I actually decided to leave DreamWorks and start up a venture with some business partners, and we made a motion capture stage. Mainly because some of us were already involved in that, and we wanted to bridge the animation world with motion capture. So this was a great way of bringing all those tools together. And that's where I started getting deeper and deeper into technology. So I did that for about 2 years, decided to jump back into the film industry. As I got into the film industry, I then got a taste of this application, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's called Unreal Engine. And so this was a big, big eye-opening opportunity for me. What they were giving us these lessons early on to teach some people in the film industry how to use this tool. And so the difference between what I showed you before with the 3D application of the lighting application is you'd put your lights in a scene, you'd hit render on either a single frame or many frames, and then you'd have to send it off, not to your computer because your computer is too small to then process that, but you'd have to send it off to what we call the render farm, and somewhere between 100 to 1,000 machines would process one frame, and you'd have to wait for those results. Well, the thing with Unreal and why game engines are so brilliant is they're very efficient and they can show you the final image displayed on your machine with hopefully not too expensive of a machine. I'm sure at this point you have all heard from the gaming industry of GPUs. Those are the graphics cards that help you draw these images like you see here. And so not to say that everything that comes out of it is perfect for and ready to go on film, but it's pretty close. And so the moment that I started learning this and seeing how easy it was to put up environments on there, it was over for me. I didn't want to go back. I was ready just to go fully into a game engine environment and start building from there. The great part about what Epic was offering was not only free tools, so Unreal is completely free for you and I to download. You could go download it right now on your computer, and it would completely just start up, and you wouldn't have to pay a single dime for it. And then you have all these other free assets here. You see in the corner here, there's this whole packet of what's called metahumans, and you can bring characters in and assets. So they have all these free assets like and sets. So you don't even just have to say, I want a tree. You could say, I want a desert scene, or I want the interior of a restaurant, or the free library, asset library they have is like endless. And you put these scenes in, and what's great about those scenes and environments that they build, they're all optimized to work in their Unreal game engine. So once you load them in, you can cruise around and play games in them, or like what we call doing virtual tours or scouting. You can, run through your scene and find different locations that you might like. And then all these assets that you see, even in this picture here, they're all adjustable. So I could grab this flower pot and move it anywhere I want. I could scale it up. I could make it disappear. I could move all these pillows, change their colors. So it's very interactive. So what I'm getting at is like when you work on a project or a film, and I used to work in animation, sometimes they would say, "Hey, could you change those green pillows and make them red?" And I would say, "Yeah, no problem. Just give me a day or give me a week. I need to re-render it and we'll be back," right? And I'll show it to you again. But in Unreal, you could say that and have the director in front of you or online. You could do a shared interactive session with them and say, make it red. And I could literally, with the click of a button, change the color of that and scale it up or duplicate out the pillows. Obviously, hopefully by now you're kind of seeing the power of how great it was, or how great it is, and it's still getting better. Just getting faster and faster. And so they're now starting to find all these different avenues for how Unreal can work. At first, it was, like I said, just a game engine. People were using it to create games and sell them on the market. And then they started finding other avenues like VR, AR, any sort of immersive. And then we got into the world of virtual production. So let's talk about what this is and what this means. So in short, and I think I have a quote here somewhere. Yeah, this is it here. This is one of my favorite quotes from Weta Digital, which is another big um, uh, virtual visual effects shop. They did all the Lord of the Rings series. So virtual production is where the physical and the digital world meet. So I'll go back to the slide in a second. But what I'm getting at here is that, so this was a scene from The Mandalorian. And if you've seen the show, you probably heard or may know a little bit about how they're building this, because they did publicize this quite a bit. But this was a very, very large space. This area is what we call a volume. And so what that means is in here, you have all these panels that are up on the wall and on the ceiling for this case. And then you can take an image or a scene from Unreal and project. I could put that living room that I had here, and I could put that up here, and then all of a sudden you're standing in a living room, right? So at the end of the day, all it is it's a background. It's an illusion that there's something behind you. But the difference between, let's say, the traditional days of green screen and this is the actor now sees what is actually in front of them, and they catch it in camera too, right? So what they call this is in-camera visual effects. And the hope and the dream is when you shoot it and you crop it properly, obviously you wouldn't capture these holes up here or up here, but if the camera was aimed right here, and the character was there and the environment was really nice and believable, you would shoot it. And the reason why they call it in-camera visual effects is that it's caught in camera and you don't have to do anything with it. It's done, it's captured. Okay. And so the other part I will say about this and what I like about this scene in general is if you notice, the ground they're standing on is real. So the illusion is never that great unless you actually bring some set design to it. So if this is an environment, a desert environment, excuse me, you have to also build something in the ground, like put some rocks or some sand. If you're in a grass field, you put some grass or some, rocks and weeds, a bench, park bench. Just bring things to add to the believability. The idea behind it is not so much that you want to look to the background, but you want to focus on the actors. So just like a matte painting or a backdrop, that would just be something that would be behind you or in the background. So in short, like this idea really has only been around and been pushed for the first time it came out was about 4 years ago. But at that time, it really wasn't that ready. They were trying it on Mandalorian, but it's getting better and better each time that we try it. Not all shapes and sizes of stages are the same. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I like this picture because it kind of shows you what it does. So it's not just a flat background, okay? It's not, otherwise you could just put a projection up there from a movie projector and show it and then put the camera there. Now, however, if the camera's not moving, we call that a static camera. So if it's just sitting on a tripod and you don't touch it at all, you really don't need this much technology. You could just project mountains or a background in an Unreal scene. But if you notice, watch the camera and watch how the camera is moving with the image, or vice versa. I should say, rather, the image is moving with the camera. Okay. And so what that means is that there's three things going on there. The camera has a tracking device that then connects to the Unreal scene, which that's the Unreal scene in the background, right? So it connects to the Unreal scene. And then when the camera moves, there's a camera inside the Unreal scene that's moving along with it, that's changing the projection. And why that happens is when the camera moves, it gives you the appeal of real space. So when you're looking at that image and somebody's sitting on the motorcycle, it will look like a real environment. And once again, look at this one. They put the sand and the rocks to really help what we call blending the scene out. So the blend is the blending into the real world from the real world to the virtual world, right? You want all those colors to match as best as possible. If you don't do that, then the illusion goes away. So at the end of the day, just remember this is purely just an illusion. That's all it's meant to be. This is another scene. This is another stage. This one actually is a stage that I've worked with multiple times. They're in Los Angeles. They have two different size stages. Orbital is the name of the studio. They've worked on several different types of projects from films to commercials to music videos. And so let's talk about what's going on in the setup here, which is you notice that it's actually curved. The curved is there because it just sort of helps to surround the environment a little bit more. And part of the appeal of virtual production is, that you're using this background as a light source. So it's kind of hard to see here, but there's actually some of the colors bleeding on this person here. So let's say in The Mandalorian, going back to that for a second, oop, trying to go back. It's not letting me. Going back to this, on the helmets there, see how light they're getting? The whole idea there is that the light itself on the screen is then lighting and informing, and you're getting reflections for free off that. So the believability of this environment wrapping with the character is really, really good. So when you're doing green screen and you're trying to pull that, you actually have to fake all that stuff. You can't actually put that on. But for here, all of that happens without any effort whatsoever. So that is part of the reason why they will wrap those panels around. They might even actually add sometimes they put some panels in front of the actors, a few extra panels on wheels, just to continue to enhance that effect. So from there, what I want to do is transition to a project that I've more recently worked on. This was a film that I worked with Sony Studios. It's an outer space film that's still being worked on, that I'm still involved in. On this one in particular, we were working on a virtual production stage. We were trying to emulate a planet, and I was the visual effects supervisor on this show. And so what that means is I have to be aware of what everyone's doing on the virtual production side. I have to interact with them. And then there might be some additional effects that go on that we layer on top. So for instance, if there was something floating in the air, something we couldn't quite accomplish on that shot, then I would have to take the layers that were shot, or the film that was shot on the stage, and then afterwards my team would then help assist to get that on completed in the shot. So here's just sort of a back behind the camera view, the camera crane. Same concept. This was on a stage. There was a tracking device on the camera that would then react. Just to point out, and I'll show you some more in a second, this rock here is real. This was built. The ground here was built, and then it transitions into the wall from there. And then this was a full scene that we made in Unreal. So this is the environment. So we have a team that's called, now at studios, that's called the Virtual Art Department, also short for, they call it VAD. And so that's the team that with Unreal skills, that's really all it takes to be in a department like that. You have to be what they call a generalist, so somebody that can help move some of these items around, adjust them, change the textures, change the lighting. So as I referenced lighting earlier, lighting becomes a really, really big thing in virtual production. So that kind of helped me quite a bit into getting into this sort of real-time lighting world, and making sure they understood how to integrate it. And so this is a full, as I said, a full Unreal scene, but then we would take this scene and then project it onto the volume. And then I had opportunities as well to then, oh, I want to show you this, but to then use these shots sometimes in effects and render them out as fully animated shots that I would blend in between the two shots. So in other words, what I'm saying is, we could have a shot here that would be a real in-camera shot, but then I could do another shot. Let's say if it was a pull out from here, I could then use that and put it as a shot in the film, and they would kind of look the same. So that's the fun part about having Unreal scenes, is you can use them for what we call live action, and you can use them for animated shots. So let me just share this with you here of one of the shots of what the camera work looks like. This was a shot in our film. So now that you've taken this in, I'm going to play it one more time and try and see if you can find where the wall starts. It's pretty hard to tell. It's a pretty good blend, okay? So to me, in terms of a blend, it really doesn't get too much better than that, especially for a flat ground. But I'll just say it goes somewhere, the blend happens somewhere around here. And then all of this is all practical ground that an art department made for us on the stage. And then the astronauts will come walking through here. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Oh, this is neat. So this goes back to this idea that I was telling you about as a visual effects supervisor. I have to come up with all kinds of different solutions to then help blend all these things together. Basically, as a visual effects supervisor, you're a problem solver, right? We have to do this thing, and how do we do it? So, in other words, they wanted some characters that weren't that were going to be CG, meaning they were going to be computer generated animated characters. And how do we get them in the scene? Well, there's this technique called volumetric capture, and I'll show you this recording. Okay. And so what happens here is we put an astronaut on a treadmill, and so we can capture that, and you can see a preview of it here. Then he's created into a point cloud, which then creates a CG character. I'll play it one more time. And so inside there, it's evenly lit, and there's tons of cameras in there, and it processes it, right? And so we can then ingest that into, we can then take that asset and put it into Unreal, and we could either put it into the virtual production, what we call the volume on stage, or I could render that out as a full CG shot. And I'll show you what I ended up doing with it. So that's putting it into Unreal and testing it out. So I was able to look at it and evaluate it. It's very lightweight, this character. So I could then, the company that we used, D&E, they scanned it for us. I was able to direct the shots. Then handed these assets in about a day or two. Then I could import them into Unreal. And then from there, then I can put it into my scene. And here's the test that I ran out with those characters in it. And see how they're moving. They're moving a little fast in this because this is sped up. But this is me putting it in that actual environment that we built from the virtual art department, which is part of virtual production. So they create all the assets for us in Unreal. And then I was able to just drop in the characters, create a camera pulling out, and then hit render. And I have this beautiful shot. Took me very little time because I didn't make any of this. All I did was move the camera and hit render. So I did the easiest part of it. But the great part was after that, then we decided, let's see if we can test it on stage, or where we can go from there. Let's see. It's not letting me advance on here. Sorry, 1 second. I think that might be the end of my slides, but I might have one more. Let me just check. Sorry. Yep, that was my last slide. Okay, so yeah, that was pretty much everything that I have in store. I'll just kind of sum it up. Some things that I've been doing lately is I have been still continuing to work on different types of virtual production projects. The part that's been really interesting for me and what I really loved, and I never thought that this would be a thing about myself, is like I said, I started out as an artist that I went to art school. I thought all I wanted to do was be really creative, painting, working digitally, but then it just happened to take me on this interesting path of learning more about technology itself. Um, that interested me in this world of virtual production because it is this organization of having many tools talk to themselves. If you think about it, it's the screen, meaning the LED panels, talking to your Unreal scene and then being captured by the computer. That is a lot of technology talking to each other. So I love sort of solving these problems. I love solving real-time problems. I have companies come up to me that I now consult for, that they say, hey, we want to actually we're doing an animated project. Can you help us set it up in a pipeline for Unreal? And I try to, investigate what is the problem you're trying to solve. And then I come up with really neat tools of how to do motion capture or how to just render things out. And so my mind starts to think this way creatively about different tools based on what they're trying to visually achieve. And so I throw around that word technology a lot because there's almost not another word to describe what I do. But the funny thing is, for me, it's a much harder job. But for all of you who are students, you were born with it, you're surrounded by it. So it's already there, whether you believe it or not. I talk to this about my own kids. And so since they know how to operate an iPad or a computer or the way TVs work these days, it's all there and accessible to you. And so easy for you to navigate. So there's less of a hurdle versus me who actually had to understand what is this crazy computer thing, right? When I first started in school, and why do I need it? And why do I have to use it to create, to be creative? But nowadays, it's so much a part of our lives that that is typically the way that you're being creative. And there's so many avenues to explore. And as long as you're interested, you just have to just understand the idea that those things change from time to time. The way that we create, the way that I created 5 years ago is different than the way I create now. And so as long as you're willing to take on that journey and being excited about learning new things, you'll always be able to make the things that you want to make. Yeah, that's about it for me. Sarah, I don't know if there's questions or
Yes, thank you so much, first of all, Eric, for such a great presentation. I had such trouble trying to figure out where the LED panel started on
oh,
that clip that you shared.
yeah,
So that was pretty amazing that it was like right in the mid ground
yeah.
uh, of that clip.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, I guess we did a good job then.
Yeah. All right. We've got a couple of questions in the Q&A, and just reminder to folks, in case you might have joined late, please be sure to add any questions using the Q&A function on Zoom if you want to ask Eric anything. The first question we have here is from Isaiah, who asks, how long did it take from high school graduation to knowing exactly the industry you wanted to get into, then getting a foothold?
It's a good question. And I'll give you the short answer, which is I'm still trying to figure that out in terms of what I want to be and what I want to do. I think that's the part that I love the most is because I've always just been so curious and gone in many different directions in my career. But in a more serious sense, when I graduated, like I had said, I wasn't totally sure what I wanted to do when I went to college. I tried things like animation, I tried photography, painting, and I still was kind of a little lost when I got out, but I knew at least I was fairly decent at graphic design. So I jumped into that. After I took a couple of years, I then left in jumped into like kind of started all over again and jumped into film, was starting early entry level jobs. So for me, my journey was a little bit longer than somebody who actually knows they want to get into film, which I've met plenty of those people. But my journey to like really get my reputation going in film probably took me, let's say, 4 years after school, then another probably like 7 years. But that's just my journey. My journey was a little bit slower to start. So yeah.
All right. We have Rez, who asks, do all virtual production sets tend to use Unreal? Do some studios use their own proprietary real-time engines?
Yes, they do. And I typically preface this, and I should have earlier, with this is just one tool of many. Everything that I show, there's always another solution. There are other tools. There's a couple of 3D tools that have tried to come out in the market to do it, but everyone who works in the let's say the 3D space of virtual production, 99% of them right in this day and age are using Unreal. There are a few that are coming out that are supposed to be more competitive, but what is another successful solution is 2D solutions. So you can bring up, let's say, driving plates, or you could shoot a city, and then there are some applications out there that require you only to bring up that 2D, and then you can track those out too. Couple of companies that I can think of is like Disguise is a big one. They do a lot of live events and musical, yeah, so like concerts, but they also do virtual production. And then there's one called Notch, and there's a few out there, but Disguise is one of the bigger ones. Yeah.
Very cool. We have Dee Dee who asks, were you self-taught in learning how to 3D model and light scenes? How do you stay persistent in practicing, and what helped you in the learning process?
So YouTube is definitely one of my biggest educators in life. I've learned a ton from them, from that. However, that wasn't always the case because there were a lot of studios that had proprietary software. For those of you that aren't familiar with that, what that means is some studios actually make and develop their own software. They call it like their secret sauce. And so you have to learn from the facility, but they're very good about it and they'll educate you and you take classes. So hopefully they have good documentation. I lean on a lot of people that I respect and ask their opinions for things, but I can't tell you how many countless hours I've learned from just YouTube. Um, Unreal has a tremendous amount of online videos and documents. I've taken courses, but I've also learned most of it from videos.
Amazing. Do you have any tips for staying persistent in practicing?
Oh, training. Oh, that's a tough one because I think the hardest part about motivation is actually, it's one thing to just mess around with tools. You don't always learn a lot unless you have some sort of mandatory objective, like an assignment. What I've actually done in that situation, if I've had something where it's like, oh, this is something I want to learn, and it just so happens a few of my other friends are learning the same thing, we task each other and say, let's make a project together. And so we'll come up with a short idea, film, an image, something, and then it keeps us to like stay on top of each other and be like, come on, let's do this thing. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. And then I'm satisfied because afterwards, when you do that creative project, it's very satisfying. And it's always more satisfying, actually, I find, to do creative projects that are my own because when you'll find when you work on certain projects, you're working for somebody else, and so your vision isn't always the same of what theirs is, right? And so you need that creative outlet to do on the side as well. Just because you're working on films, they're exciting, but they might not end up being the style of film that you're actually interested in working on. So just make sure to always be creative outside of your work.
For some high school students, for example, self-starting a project, a group project with classmates could be a really great idea, like you mentioned. I'm wondering how else could high school students, what else could they do to get some of that initial experience compositing on a film?
Yeah, so there are some of those, and I can't say off the top of my head what these sites are, but I know at least when I was still trying to learn compositing, there are some great mentors and websites out there, and they do a lot of 3D challenges and 2D challenges. And so those I find really good because everyone seems to be incredibly supportive on those, and they'll even give you critiques and notes. I used to do that as well. I used to chime in and as a, 3D professional and just try and give a bare minimum of, hey, if you just do this one thing or add a little contrast, saturation, it'd really help on this image. So I find outside resources that way on the internet for some of those like 3D and 2D compositing sites to be great resources. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And speaking of those kinds of hard skills, Jose asks, what are two hard skills you would recommend to someone who wants to direct, produce, or just work in virtual production? They say perhaps Unreal, Blender, or something else. I know you've mentioned Houdini and
Yeah.
Maya in your
It's
presentation.
tricky because, of course, are you going to have an advantage if you know 20 different tools? Sure, you'll be spread really thin, but I honestly think you can go a long way with Unreal because it's not only a good storytelling device. I know a lot of directors that have learned it just to kind of do their story pitch. Um, sure, it might be nice to know something like Blender because that's also a free tool if you wanted to model some assets. I think you'd be fine with those. The only other thing I would say is it would be good to have, if you really wanted to put the full package together, it's really nice to know some sort of video editing software. The nicer, more higher end one that I use is Adobe Premiere, but I think there are some, cheaper, more affordable resources. I'm not sure what they are off the top of my head. I think Apple still has their like iMovie. But yeah, knowing those three things will get you a long way.
Speaking of those hard skills, I'm wondering, to what degree does someone need experience in coding to work in virtual production? Is that common?
It's helpful. It's not necessary. It's usually a skill that says nice to have because when you're at a smaller place, you do need to be a jack of all trades. It is nice when you're stuck in a situation or the way you don't, it's slowing you down. So to be able to like build a script or a tool is always powerful. When I worked at larger studios, we had people called technical directors, and they would work side by side with us, and they would build those tools if we were getting stuck, or they'd fix some software that wasn't working for us. On the smaller end, it's preferable to know a little bit, and all those are free resources as well on in Unreal.
Amazing. We have Reed here who asks, what is your favorite movie that you worked on?
Oh,
Eric, you worked on quite a lot.
this is an easy answer for me.
Oh,
One of my favorite films that I worked on was Puss in Boots, and so there's a reason
amazing.
for that. And it's not even about actually the output or the outcome of the movie. It was the collaboration. Already I've been asked the question about hard skills, but this goes back to probably the more important thing, which is soft skills. Communication's key, being on the same page. I've been on all kinds of different projects with all kinds of different personalities. Most and all of them have, been great experiences. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been doing it so long. But there are some that are better than others, and most of those came by the fact that we just all understood that this was a true collaboration, and nobody's idea was more precious than the other. So it was, oh, that's neat. Let's try that. And we would talk through things. So I would literally have the director or the production designer come up to me and ask me what I thought and how I would make it different. And they were up for the challenge. And so I'll always remember that. And it changed the way that I thought about films. I always thought before that you're supposed to just make what they tell you to make. But sometimes they're like, well, you are an artist too. So we want to hear what you want to do on this film. So that is why I liked Puss in Boots.
Amazing. Was it the first one or
The
the?
first one, I worked on both. The second one, I only worked on the look development, so like helping to create the idea and the vision, and then that's actually when I transitioned and left the studio. But the first one I worked on from start to finish, and the ironic thing is, they're still the people that were the production designer, the visual effects super, all the upper tier, they're all still really close friends of mine because of that experience.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
It's always a benefit to be a team player.
yeah.
Actually, that makes me wonder, because you've done VFX in live action, you've worked with DreamWorks so closely in animation. What has that been like to transition between the two uh, types of film? And do you prefer one over the other?
I think yes, I like animation better because with visual effects, I like visual. It's funny when I worked in animation, I kept missing visual effects. But what I knew that I always liked about animation a little bit better is it is a fully creative process, right? You are in control of the entire image versus you're trying to solve maybe one little problem in an image. And typically that problem can be incredibly challenging. And sometimes the payoff is amazing, and sometimes it's like, oh, I just made the sky a little bluer, or you're removing something. I mean, it's very what you do in visual effects, what we know as visual effects, right? Everyone in the world thinks of like Star Wars, but 99% of all films has some sort of visual effects in it, and a lot of it is seamless. It's like removing the thing that you're not supposed to talk about that went away. Oops, we left this in the scene. Can you paint that out? Or, oh, we didn't like this object. Can you swap it out? And then you don't talk about it. You're not supposed to talk about it. Oh, it was a cloudy day. Can you make it a sunny day, right? Don't point out the thing that wasn't supposed to happen. And so that, and it, which leads me back to virtual production. The whole great thing about like, why do we do virtual production? It's because we have fully control over our environment. So we can shoot sunset all day long. We can go back to that scene if you want to reshoot and just load up the scene. So all those controlled items or lack of control, the chaos that you normally have when you're out in a city shooting, you have to deal with less of those problems that you have to fix in post.
Right. And I think that goes back to the quote that you included from Weta, which was so great. Like virtual production truly is where digital and physical worlds collide.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's a yeah, it is. It's the best quote I've seen so far.
It really helped me understand too what virtual production meant. It's a really great summary. And speaking of, Eric, thank you for this fantastic summary and overview of your career. This
Yeah.
has been very, very educational. I hope everyone in the audience has learned something new about virtual production. And yeah, Eric, do you have any parting words, advice for our audience today before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would say something I kind of touched upon earlier is one thing that I do see from time to time that where people really gain a lot of ground in trying to get into this business is really being sort of attuned to what's going on around your environment, showing that you do want to learn and you're excited to join the team, and just always understanding that the ride is always it is a journey of learning. I mean, I still preach that to this day when I go into something. I pretty much tell people I'm still learning this process and hopefully you'll be patient with me, but I'm really excited to learn it. And if you go in with that attitude versus the don't worry about that, I got this, it's not going to go well if things don't go well because they're going to say, wait, I thought you understood what this was. I always come in with the attitude of I'm excited to work with people. It's a very collaborative process. And so if that's the type of thing that you want to do, then this really could be a great opportunity in business for you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
What a great way to end this presentation. Eric, thank you so much for being with us today, for sharing your time and your expertise.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.